Was that a hit or what the fuck? Hey.
There's a lot burning.
This is a sensation. The loudest emergency in Russia. Over Moscow, air defense mistakenly attacked a passenger plane. Flight Minsk-Moscow.
See, it's burning. Even the trees around are on fire now.
The pilot's last words, "We're on fire. Our own are shooting us down."
This is the pilot of the aircraft.
I repeat, this is a civilian route. Clearance confirmed.
We're being targeted by air defense.
I repeat, air defense is firing at a civilian aircraft.
The Russian aircraft ended up in the skies over the Moscow region. A Panzer missile mistook it for an enemy drone. The explosion occurred during the approach to land at Sheremetyevo.
This is not a target. There are people here.
I repeat, the civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV. Altitude maintained, route approved. We are under heavy fire.
New secret data has surfaced. There is panic in the Ministry of Murder. Military communications are gone. Was this Putin's order or a system failure? A carpet regime has been introduced at Vnukovo and Sheremetyevo. Takeoffs and landings are prohibited. There is panic and evacuation there. Breaking news. Russian air defense attacked a passenger plane on the Minsk-Moscow route. This is the most high-profile emergency of the night. New details have emerged. A Panzer system opened fire right in the sky over the Moscow region. The airliner was mistaken for a drone. The plane was damaged, but managed to make it to Sheremetyevo. The pilot's last words, "We're being shot down by our own."
This is the pilot of the aircraft speaking. I repeat, this is a civilian route. Clearance confirmed. We're being targeted by air defense.
I repeat, air defense is firing at a civilian aircraft.
This is not a target. There are people here.
I repeat, the civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV.
And this isn't an isolated incident. Overnight, there was a wave of explosions and fires across Russia. Russian air defense is now firing on its own. Shells are falling on residential neighborhoods. An apartment building caught fire in the Moscow region, and apartments are burning in Pushkin as well. Oh my god. UAVs are attacking Moscow, the city center, and the Moscow suburbs.
This is such a tragedy right now.
Drones are crashing into apartment buildings. There's a fight there.
We're filming. Here are the fragments, and over there, the apartment is on fire. Damn, that was a huge blast. I just managed to run away in time.
Everything's burning, apartments are on fire, people are screaming, there's a massive evacuation.
Now missiles.
Something hit. All my windows blew out in seconds.
Muscovites are screaming.
Look over there. There's thick smoke rising. Everything is catching on fire. Ah! Somebody help me.
There's a fire at the CHP plant in Penza. The city is in blackout, and that's already the work of the good Ukrainian drones.
A lot of them are flying toward the city.
It got hit there, a direct strike.
On the second one, right on.
In Dubna, the Kronstadt plant, where drones are produced, was attacked again. In Tula, a series of strikes hit the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. Strikes have been recorded in Kursk, Tula, Tver, Moscow, in the Moscow region, and Dubna. Russia is in panic. And most importantly, in Belgorod, a Russian air defense missile also hit a residential building. Today is one of the most shameful episodes in the history of Russian air defense. They shot down their own passenger plane. Who gave the order? Why is the air defense operating blindly? And who will be next? While Moscow is putting out fires in apartment buildings, the Panzer systems are firing indiscriminately into the sky. Today we are joined by the well-known military analyst, Colonel Roman Sweeton. He will explain how this is even possible and what it means for Putin and the front, and what will happen next.
You see, it's burning. Even the trees around are on fire now.
Well, after a couple of planes go down from these Panzer strikes, believe me, the third one just won't take off. They'll ground them and just sit tight, quietly, not making a move. First, the Russians really do have a very good air defense system, an Army SAM complex. That's the Panzer, different versions of the Panzer, 1 Panzer, 2. They've already loaded the second one with 48 missiles, while the first one has 12. So it's a decent machine, an excellent machine, but it needs to operate in a combat environment. That is, when everything and everyone around is an enemy, as they say. That's the mode it operates in. Well, this is Army air defense, an Army surface to air missile system designed to cover troops on the move. Even during an offensive, it's used precisely for cover. That's when everything that moves is shot down because everything is considered hostile. And these Panzers, it's a decent machine, but I'll say it again, it's an Army mechanism. They deployed it at civilian airfields, but only the Russians could come up with something like that. So, using such a good machine in this way to destroy any flying object, regardless of its level, including drones. It has cannons. Well, the first Panzer has cannons, and they work pretty well. And it's the same story with the missile. The missile has a range of up to 20 kilometers with an effective radius of 18 to 20 kilometers. It can practically take down everything. And so these Panzers are deployed by the Russians at airfields, on rooftops, even on the Ministry of Defense building. They've installed a Panzer there. Naturally, if it starts firing in all directions, let me repeat, it's supposed to operate roughly out in the fields, when there is an offensive against the enemy, when it's covering its own troops. But here, they're placing it right in the center of Moscow, on top of a high rise. So where's it going to shoot? It'll end up firing at the high rises themselves. So within a 20-kilometer radius of where the Panzer is stationed, people should be having a nervous breakdown. Absolutely. A nervous breakdown is guaranteed because at any moment, a Panzer missile could come flying into your toilet. Just imagine you sit down and suddenly, hello, good evening from Ukraine. That's pretty much how it happened this time, by the way. We had a widespread attack, which was problematic, I would say, in terms of efficiency. For the sixth time, we've said that there's no point in just hitting the Russians everywhere indiscriminately. After all, they still have those same Panzers and they shoot down most of them. It's better to strike at a single area. But nevertheless, they struck Kronstadt. That's in Dubna. There's a really serious facility there. First of all, Dubna is one of Russia's technological centers, located north of Moscow. It's about, I think, 140 kilometers or so from Moscow. But nevertheless, one of Russia's main nuclear research centers is located there. You'd still need to go there. Take a look at what they're running in circles there, those protons and neutrons. They run them in that direction, clockwise, not counterclockwise. It's the same situation here. In Dubna and in Kronstadt, they assemble components and units for Russian aviation missile technology. That place should have been shut down a long time ago. So it would be better if all our drones, for example, targeted Dubna and took out one or another facility there. Actually, both need to be taken out. But for now, we're talking about a barrage. Still, this barrage strike, at least a dozen targets. The Russians, well, they're definitely having nervous breakdowns, that's for sure, because they fired off missiles in all directions, even tried to shoot down their own plane, but failed. Can you imagine how clumsy they are? They can't even shoot down a civilian plane. So, from this point of view, obviously there's sarcasm, but on the other hand, it's also an indicator of certain technical capabilities of these types of weapons. And the fact that the Panzers will be hitting civilian targets is 100% certain. As long as they're stationed in residential areas, they're definitely going to hit high-rise buildings. So get ready to take hits from your own side. Well, it's nothing new. Russians are used to it.
Friends, please like this video. Write in the comments what you think about the Panzer firing at a civilian plane, at civilian targets. Once again, this is very important. Russian air defense is firing at its own. Everything is falling onto residential apartments. In the Moscow region, a high-rise building caught fire, and in Pushkin, another one is burning too. In Penza, there's a fire at the thermal power plant, and the city is in blackout. In Belgorod, an air defense missile hit a residential building, and in Dubna, the Kronstadt enterprise where drones are produced was attacked again. In Tula, there was a series of strikes on the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. Strikes are being recorded in Kursk, Tver, the Moscow region, and Dubna. And Russia's in a panic. Roman Grigorievich, regarding Tula, we struck the design bureau where air defense systems are developed.
It was a godly amount of smoke. Well, you can use drones against the design bureau, since it's out in the open. Not underground, not a purely military facility that's buried deep and can only be reached with bunker-busting warheads or ballistic missiles. But these design bureaus are actually quite significant. The Russians have design bureaus, including one in Tula, but mostly they're in the Moscow region, in the Moscow Oblast. The reason I always mention Moscow, even though there's one in Tula and several more up to the Urals, at least a few cities have design bureaus that are involved in the development of both aviation and missile technology. and naturally, ground-based strike systems as well. And right now, the main focus is on innovative aspects related to drones, control systems, and new types of warhead systems. So, this is an entire process that needs to be eradicated at its root. And so, basically, when it comes to design bureaus, well, it makes sense to use drones because a drone, well, how much can it carry? Well, 50 kilograms of explosives. It can't do anything to a military facility that's buried 3 stories underground. It just won't work. Sometimes a design bureau is located in a penthouse somewhere where the engineers like to get some fresh air. And then suddenly a fierce beaver comes flying in. And not just one, but beavers from both sides at once. But in reality, of course, drones are better used against oil refineries. When it comes to oil refineries, believe me, even a single drone, if it gets through and completes its mission, can inflict extremely serious damage. Why is that? Because an oil refinery is practically ready to go up in flames. You just need to bring a match. And here, 50 kilograms of explosives are dropped right on top of it.
Roman Grigorievich, regarding Dubna, where the Kronstadt enterprise was attacked, which also manufactures drones. We have repeatedly discussed that Dubna is home to nuclear facilities. Yes, nuclear research sites. Yet we keep attacking there on a regular basis. How important is it to carry out these strikes? And you always say that the strikes need to be effective. So, in fact, we need to almost completely destroy the targets. The floor is yours.
Well, you're right. You're a woman, but you've grasped the main idea correctly. There is no point in wasting our drones if there's no efficiency. Let's say we've produced 100 drones. First of all, people chipped in for these drones. They were produced, purchased, delivered to the troops, and then target designation takes place. They fly off in all directions, but there's air defense at the targets. The same Panzer systems are stationed there. So the Panzer, for example, is loaded with 12 missiles. So if you send a 13th drone there, it'll get through and complete its combat mission, and the Panzer will shoot down the first 12 or however many it manages to shoot down. That's why it makes no sense to just send drones in all directions in a fan, 5 per each Panzer. Well, that's what happens. They'll just shoot them in. So what's the efficiency of that? In other words, when there's no efficiency, it raises the question, are we just disposing of drones this way? I've already explained it in simple terms. That's how any air defense system works. There's what's called the interception coefficient of the system. So in order to exceed this interception coefficient at a single point, you need to send about twice as many drones as that coefficient. If there's a single Panzer system, roughly speaking, just to illustrate, if there's one Panzer and it has 12 missiles loaded, then with one salvo, it can shoot down 12 drones. That means you need to send 24 drones there, and then they will accomplish the combat mission. But instead, it turns out they sent them out in groups of 5. Only in the information flow can Dasha and I confirm, yes, there was some kind of drone flight somewhere. But what's the efficiency of that? That's what I'm saying. Even you are already clearly identifying this. Efficiency matters, and it's much more important than the informational message itself about someone flying somewhere or someone shooting at someone. In other words, there's absolutely nothing military about it. There's a bit of showmanship here, a bit of theatrics. But believe me, artists have never won wars. Wars are won by military professionals who plan combat missions and allocate enough forces and resources to each mission in order to achieve a certain level of efficiency. But now, at least when it comes to target designation, only some theatrical techniques are being used and nothing more. Some little announcements. They announced something, collected money for tickets, and then everyone scattered. Like gypsies, but only in the worst in a bad sense.
Roman Nikolaevich, here's another piece of information. Last night, the Lukovitsy aircraft plant in the Moscow region of Russia was attacked. This was confirmed by the National Security and Defense Council. It specializes in the production and modernization of MiG-29 and MiG-31 fighter jets, their modifications, and also participates in the development of new combat aviation models, in particular projects for a next-generation frontline fighter. This is a quote, based on the MiG platform. It is also involved in the modernization cycle of German drones, wrote Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. What do you think?
And this, in fact, confirms our point. Look at what the CCD people are saying. A MiG manufacturing plant was attacked. As a military man, I immediately asked these performers, did you destroy the plant? Will the MiGs be able to take off or not? What will they answer? No, it wasn't destroyed, but it was attacked. What's the point of this attack? So that so that in the information flow, the CCD people could say it was attacked. Now, if the CCD were to clearly confirm that after our drones attacked, the production cycle, the manufacturing of MiG-29s was halted there for a month or 2 or even 3 months, that would actually be some kind of efficiency indicator. But what do they say? Such and such plant was attacked, something was attacked in Dubna, like some plant there, something was attacked there. And what's the point of these attacks? That's what I'm talking about. So either just keep quiet. I mean, don't go around saying that you're losers in that case. Just stay silent. That you basically burned through several dozen drones, practically sending them straight into the enemy's air defenses. They achieved nothing. That's exactly what the CCD confirmed. Here's the kind of report they give. The plant was attacked, and that's it. But the real report that should have been given is the plant was destroyed. The target was destroyed. And if you I get why they can't say that, because you can't destroy a military plant with drones. Military plants are built to withstand a nuclear strike, nuclear weapons. Well, how are you going to destroy it with a 50-kilogram drone? Next question. Then why are you sending these drones to military plants at all? What's the point of these deployments? What are they for? For what purpose? To dispose of the drones? Let me repeat. Where can you send drones? To places that already tend to explode and catch fire on their own. You can target above ground depots, not underground ones, but above ground. There are depots for transshipment, for example, so-called transit depots, which are located at certain distances, like 500 or 700 kilometers away. So you can target those. You can hit airfields, oil refineries, and that's about it. Well, you can also operate in Crimea. Why is it possible to operate in Crimea? If you approach from the sea, it's inconvenient for them to shoot down targets because they're afraid that our Magura drones with anti-aircraft missile systems could take down their helicopters and planes. This has already happened more than once. So there really aren't any more targets for drones, which is why our information operations guys and our politically motivated target spotters, we need to drop this whole artist thing once and for all. Let the military handle targeting. Let them designate the targets and allocate enough forces and resources to destroy the given object. And believe me, when the military does the calculations, there are certain coefficients they use when they figure out how many drones need to be sent, say, to destroy that same target in Dubna, then we won't hear anything else about it. What we'll hear is that 100, 150 drones were sent. They hit Dubna, and believe me, nothing will be left there. At least for this particular task. But just to take them and burn them for no reason, what could I say? No matter how much we talk about this, now everyone is starting to talk about it. Our political leadership is exposing itself far too obviously now. Such great target designators they are, but they're not even really designating targets. They started an interesting trend. They're coordinating targets. Some targets get approved, others don't. That's all there is to it. Those who didn't pay for the approved targets, well, let's just say they probably did pay for the approved ones. Remember that old joke when a traffic cop checks your documents and keeps saying, not allowed, not allowed, not allowed? Then he sees a 10 and suddenly it's, oh, it's allowed, go ahead. It's pretty much the same situation here. That's how it looks, at least from an analytical point of view. But as for how things really are, well, that's a matter for counterintelligence to handle. Like the disposal of our drones, wherever they end up.
Roman Grigorievich, considering the aviation collapses, can we assume that the time will really come when Russian Panzer systems will shoot down their own civilian planes taking off from Sheremetyevo or Pulkovo?
Well, after a couple of planes go down from being hit by these Panzers, believe me, the third one just won't take off. They'll ground them and everyone will just sit tight, quietly, not making a move. They'll take the train up to the Urals, and only after the Urals will they fly. Well, how far is it to there? To the Urals? 2,000 kilometers. They'll rattle along. It's not a problem.
Successfully demobilized. Commander of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Ilyan Sergey. No details are being reported, but everyone is saying it's karma. ISU, GUR, SBU. They will find every war criminal, no matter where they are. And the Chief of Staff of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Beshgarden Lininy. Roman Mavovich, the floor is yours.
This was a strike on the headquarters of the 155th, and there was a repeat strike as well. And as a result, almost the entire command of the 155th Brigade was taken out. Along with the former brigade commander, who at that time was, well, you could also say, already the former deputy commander of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So they really took out a lot of them, about a dozen officers at that time. High-ranking ones were eliminated. For the Russians, this kind of action on our part is very effective. They have a big bench of reserves. Everyone wants to become an admiral, a general, and so on, and the like. So you could say we help the enemy climb the career ladder, but in reality, the 155th Brigade, it's already been wiped out 649 times. And for us, it was at Vuhledar. In Vuhledar, they lost 2 full units. In fact, the brigade commander who was at Vuhledar was taken out. Plus, the new brigade commander who replaced him was just eliminated near Kursk. This direction is very advantageous for us because the Russians there don't have such a serious layered line of defense, specifically along the Kursk axis. Why not? Because they're extremely scared idiots. They thought we wouldn't move toward Moscow. That is the Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod regions. And there isn't a defensive line there, like, for example, the Surovikin line in Zaporizhia or Donbass. After 11 years of construction, these extremely scared idiots still don't have one. They cover this direction either with naval infantry or paratroopers. The main naval infantry units are the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade from Crimea and the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade from Vladivostok. There was also the Caspian Naval Infantry Brigade from the Caspian region, along with several other units. Plus the Ivanovo paratroopers. It turns out there are paratroopers in Ivanovo, or rather there used to be. In other words, they gathered up the last guys and sent them to Kursk. And now in Ivanovo, they'll have to set up an LGBT community because there are no men left. But something has to be done because the women in Ivanovo are stunning, absolutely gorgeous. So that's the kind of attrition happening along the Kursk direction, right along the route where even the leadership of the 155th Brigade was wiped out. That's Glushkovo, that's Elgov, that's Rylsk, that's Korenyevo, that's Chetkino. In other words, these are the rear areas of the Russian corps that's now still trying to shuffle around somewhere along the Sumy direction. Since
January, Russia has lost 100,000 soldiers killed. Not total losses, but killed. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio after meeting with Lavrov. Give your assessment of this political statement.
Well, if Lavrov confirmed such losses to him, then at least Rubio can be believed. He wouldn't just say something like that for no reason. The question is, in what context is he saying all this? They're still trying to stop the fighting by giving up our territory. In other words, it's a capitulation scenario. A ceasefire at this point, according to Rubio and his associates, meaning Trump as well, would be a capitulation for Ukraine. That is, it would mean the Russian army maintains control over the occupied part of Ukraine. That's more than a fifth. Over 20% is already under occupation. So in this context, when fears are being stoked like this, then you can see and understand that we're simply being pushed toward capitulation, toward losing territory, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and so on and so forth. I think there's no point in paying attention to such statements. Why? Because Ukrainians won't stop. This concerns Ukrainians. Ukrainians, Cossacks, they have never given up their land to anyone. Land and freedom are the main slogans of our people, of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. So we will definitely carry out our combat mission up to the state border. That is, after we reach the state border, we will destroy them. Part of the Russian army. By that time, God willing, with the sanctions from Maluk and Budanov, we will destroy Russian oil refineries, and the Russian economy will collapse. That's when we'll talk about the losses of the Russian army, and we'll confirm them. And believe me, they won't be in the hundreds of thousands. They'll be in the millions of Russians.
God willing. Dear audience, once again, please like this video, and in the comments, share your opinion, your analysis, and write a few words to our duo with Roman Grigorievich. We work for you 3 times a week, and that's very important. Roman Grigorievich, regarding We Don't Stop. So we've come to an important topic, occupied Crimea. Now I'm going to present you with a series of information for analysis and discussion. 2 powerful explosions were heard in the Krasnoperekovsky district, according to subscribers of Crimean Wind. Next. A missile launch took place in the Jenkoy district at 11:25. A loud explosion was heard in the Krasnoperekovsky district. Russian air defense was active in Jankoy. The attack by Ukrainian drones is reported to be extremely powerful in occupied Crimea. Before the Tanka Bridge, on the way out of Crimea, there is a massive traffic jam stretching 26 kilometers. Right now, missile launch, Roman Grigorievich, our attack on Crimea continues.
At the very least, I think our drone specialists have entered alongside the shawarma vendors. and a 26-kilometer traffic jam. Can you imagine how much money they're making there right now at the exit from Crimea? And now they're even selling corn. So this whole Crimean process, we understand it perfectly well. They're making a fortune. That is, after getting a certain cut from these shawarma vendors. You can crank out more, or at least buy more drones and send them where they're needed. But in reality, of course, there was an attack on Crimea last night. Drones were coming, missiles were coming, and yes, Neptunes were being intercepted. Russians on social media were freaking out at night, saying everything there would be destroyed. Not everything. Mostly they were targeting the anti-aircraft missile systems. It was the air defense systems that were trying to intercept them. Specifically, the air defense system located in Jankoy. Why is it always near Jankoy? We've talked several times about strikes near Jankoy. Why is that? There's an airfield there. It's a tactical airfield, mainly for Army aviation. Helicopters there are being rearmed. So that's where the air defense system is located. There's the S-300, S-400 systems there. Once we already took it out, but now they've set it up again, and that's why people hear it. There are always approaches near Krasnoperekopsk and exits near that same Jankoy. This is exactly the work of the Russian air defense, which covers the Kerch direction from the northwest. And that's why it's very important for us not to slow down, to keep up the strikes. At least every other night or every 2 nights, we need to hit the enemy's air defense, including in Jankoy, and wipe it out completely. That was the attempt, and today drones went in. I don't think this will be the last time. So, step by steady step, we're moving significantly closer to our goal. To our main objective, the Kerch Bridge. Well, in a 26-kilometer traffic jam, that's sacred. They've been robbed, warmed up, and so on. So at this point, these are the Russians' problems. They knew where they were going. Now they'll find out how they're going to get out.
Get out of Crimea, yeah, only by swimming. Breaststroke, freestyle, just like you suggested. Dogtown. Yes, dog paddle. All the options. Roman Grigorievich has already articulated this very clearly in previous episodes. Watch the previous episodes. Roman Grigorievich. And as for Crimea, the cherry on top is that mobile service is down. Cell phones, everything is out. And of course, the Rashirists, whiners, are sending messages saying that nothing is working for them. Isn't that wonderful, right?
Well, the thing is, in this case, there are 2 options. Either write letters to Grandpa in the village, or dig out the pagers. Remember, that was in the last millennium. They need to set up pager communication in Crimea. So what's going on with that, huh? Well, at least they won't be calling on the rail line anymore after all. Although, who knows? Russians, they can do all sorts of crazy things.
I've prepared the following information as the cherry on top for you. Meanwhile, in Orsk, Orenburg region of Russia, a mechanical plant is on fire. According to local social media, those are some impressive explosions I see. The 8th workshop of the plant is on fire. Supposedly, the fire started with some materials catching fire. The Orsk mechanical plant, a major Russian engineering enterprise, produces goods for the defense industry, including shell casings and components for MLRS. It also specializes in equipment for the oil and gas sector. Roman Nikolaevich, well, they sweetened the deal a bit for us with the oil and gas sector. The floor is yours.
Because these are our concerned citizens. They accomplished several tasks at once. The first was indeed a military target. The second sector, including oil and gas, and the third main one. You noticed that, right? Our concerned citizens pointed out, it turns out, where the Orks lair is located, in Orsk. So specifically there, from there, all the Orks come at us, at least in terms of information. So a big thank you to our concerned citizens. A huge thank you, really. And why? Because we see their actions. Really, they are causing certain problems in the Russian economy. Oil transfer mechanisms of various kinds are burning. They set fire to pipelines and oil pumping stations. In Komsomolsk-on-Amur, they burned down an oil refinery. In other words, they're targeting the energy sector, and all it takes is a single match. Dry grass is set on fire where the pipeline runs, and that's it. You can write off the pipeline, and even more so the gas pipeline. So they're working, and directly too. They're also targeting enterprises, which in principle can be put out of commission if you know how. And once again, I'll repeat, there are plenty of people who care, because this war, the genocidal war of the Moscow Empire against Ukraine and Ukrainians, has worn everyone out, including Russians. especially since we remember that there are more than 10 million Ukrainians, genetically speaking, in Russia alone. There are dozens of states, dozens of republics and regional state entities that are now practically conquered by this Moscow empire, this Moscow cognate. And in the end, they too want their freedom. In other words, this prison of nations must be destroyed, and it can be destroyed from within as well.
Roman Grigorievich, for the conclusion. In Russia, they are expecting drone attacks, but not from outside the country, but from within Russia itself. Sources from the VCK OGPU channel reported that security forces in Moscow have been put on high alert due to possible attacks. All defense and shelter systems have been brought to a heightened state of combat readiness. FSB officers have been deployed to duty almost in full force.
Well, it's right to be afraid. Why? Because how long have we been talking about this with you? It's been 2 years now. You just go to the market, buy an FPV drone, attach some explosives to it, send it off, and complete a combat mission. When it comes to oil refineries, that's a whole different story. With a single grenade, you can burn down an entire plant if you know where to hit. With a single grenade, you can shut down a metallurgical plant if you blow it up, say with an FPV drone, or directly blow up the oxygen workshop. There are such critical points at every plant, at every enterprise, and those who aren't indifferent know them very well. So, what mechanisms are involved in these kinds of actions? But each concerned individual chooses for themselves, just to avoid getting caught by the Russian FSB, Russian police, gendarmerie, call them whatever you like. And these are the mechanisms that are used. Today, for example, we discussed how in Orsk, at the center of the Orsk Russian movement, a plant burned down, at least the main workshop did. So yes, that's correct. Not in terms of preparation, but indeed, in the near future, this process will intensify. It is already intensifying, but the concentration of certain resources, a strike at a single point is very important for us. Yes, but just like with their aviation, without drones in one spot, the optimal option right now for all those who care, to gather in Moscow itself, to burn Moscow as well for that matter, they need to understand, specifically Moscow and Moscovites, those who make the decisions and practically drain all of Russia. They suck out every last drop they can. They are the ones who should feel this war. And it's not just a war against Ukraine. This is also a war against Moldova, against the Pridnestrovian Republic. A war against Georgia, we saw that perfectly well. The war in Syria. Wherever Russians go, wherever Russians set foot, something always starts there. Some kind of little war.
Burn Moscow. A perfect ending. Dear audience, we work with Roman Grigorievich 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. For audiences all over the world, on my YouTube channel, Dar Sheslivaya, Roman Spatin, a well-known analyst. Roman Grigorievich, thank you, and see you again on Monday.
Goodbye.